do. Okay. We can continue hypothesize our theological hypothesizing. But I'm gonna, in the meantime, while you guys figure out theology and God, I'm gonna read this paper called "Sex and Horror" by Steve Jones, and it's in the Routledge Companion to Media, Sex, and Sexuality from 2018. This is the 2017 version. Hold on one. I didn't turn on my air conditioning today, and so it's getting a little warmer. I turned on my fan though. So here we go. And as always, feel free to ask questions and let me know. This is crack horror relationship. We got sidetracked from God by sex euphemisms. Maybe that's what God is a sex euphemism. Coitus, yes. Much like biblical Corinthians. God damn it, Shane. Sex and horror, Steve Jones. Here we go. The combination of sex and horror may be disquieting to many, but the two are natural, if perhaps gruesome, bedfellows. And you see, we can't even get off the topic. Here we go. In fact, sex and horror coincide with such regularity in contemporary horror fiction that the two concepts appear to at least be partially intertwined. This is not to suggest that the sex horror confluence is an exclusively contemporary phenomenon. For example, Hunter Gardner traces the lineage of contemporary psychosexual horror fiction back to antiquity. Brian Godaw maps the relationship between sex and horrific violence in the Bible in order to anchor his exploration of modern horror cinema. See, we're just like, this is all together. We're all just like in synchronicity here. Is that why we yell what we do during sex? All right, yeah. Oh, Vipers, that's so sweet of you. Yeah, exactly, Shane. Cathal Tohill and Pete Toombs posit that the focus on violence and sex they find in Italian cinema is little more than a modern-day version of the ancient Roman circus. Blood, passion, violence, and sex were an integral part of these spectacles. It is unsurprising then that the horror genre boasts a bounty of sexual themes and sexually driven plots. This sex-horror relationship is sometimes connotative rather than overt. Examples of this relationship range from the seduction overtones of Nosferatu, Ein Symphonie des Grauens, and the juxtaposition of nudity and horror promised by European exploitation filmmakers, to Hellraiser's sadomasochistic iconography. And now we're back to what Ivan got himself up to. They didn't have that bit in Gladiator? Well, what was that? There was a really popular HBO thing that they definitely did have a lot of sex and whatnot in. Maybe that was more accurate. Wrong. People didn't fuck in the Coliseum. That was off in the Fornix. Well, there we go. Okay. Now we know where it was. Oh, and Shane, we did have a question for you from the other stream the other night. Were there ancient your mama jokes back in like Rome or Greece? Did like they ever have like a your mama is so fat that like, you know, when she went into the Coliseum, she was the whole Coliseum or something? Okay, so from where we get fornicate from is from the Fornix where they did. Yeah, she did. Got you right in the Coliseum. Fornicating, exactly. I didn't know it was a place, and so now we know. Vipers was the best. Your mom is so fat she took a spoon to the Super. Oh God, that's right. That was Vipers. Yeah. Okay. More overt explorations of sex are offered in horror films that are based around the porn industry, including The Life and Death of a Porno Gang, Celluloid Nightmares, and Quad X, the porn movie massacre. Many mainstream pornographic films have, Freudian slip there, have also explored horrific themes and utilized horror tropes. For instance, The Devil and Miss Jones, the eponymous protagonist is damned to a purgatory that is defined by her unfulfilled sexual desires. Rape is a prevalent mode of sexual expression within violent Japanese pinku eiga. And recent horror porn crossover movies such as The Walking Dead, a hardcore parody, incorporate gore and archetypal horror characters, here zombies, not just in the settings, but also within pornographic sex sequences. So we're having zombie sex. Okay, makes sense. There were some genres of jokes, but not specifically your mama. There were pretty common you're fucking next jokes that get carved into tombstones. Okay, there we go. I figured there were, like, there'd be, like, some insult jokes, and I think that's what the thrust of the question was. Like, were there that sort of like, antagonistic jokes? So yeah. No, I was like, I bet there are. So I just wanted to ask. Thank you. Okay, continuing. In other cases, sex and horror are balanced in a manner that thoroughly blurs the distinction between porn and horror. For example, Tumbling Doll of Flesh is constituted by 2 lengthy sex sequences, followed by what is arguably the most horrific rape mutilation sequence to be published in the Japanese micro-budget video market. I mean, this is just, out of all the things I was expecting to say, Japanese micro-budget video market was not it, to tell you the truth. The film's runtime is mainly composed of mundane pornography, yet its horrific crescendo is its most memorable segment. Although the film was marketed as gory horror, its finale dominates the video's packaging. Its content is mainly focused on genitally explicit sex. Such subject matter makes the film hard to classify in generic terms, but also highlights that the two elements somehow fit together. In a more recent example, the dark web clip compilation of M.D. Pope, Most Disturbed Person on Planet Earth, juxtaposes real death footage with mainly scatological porn in a manner that blurs the boundaries between desire and disgust. M.D. Pope thus implies that pornography can be both attractive and repulsive, while death footage can be simultaneously horrifying and titillating. There's a lot of hardcore perving behind the Hello Kitty exterior. That is not something I've really thought about. But that's interesting. Unreal. I wouldn't be surprised. A lot of stuff gets converted, perverted, or whatever from its original thing, but yeah. Shane says, in Norse culture, there's something called Senna, which is sort of escalating exchange of insults where skill was assessed by managing to make something just barely more insulting than your opponent, and it continued until one person got so offended that they couldn't take it. See, that's interesting. Like, the origins of the insult rap battle could go back to Norse sort of game Senna. Yeah. Shane says, yeah, like a rap battle. That's what I was thinking, DCI. Shane says, pretty frequently involves saying horrible things about mothers. I mean, if you're going to insult someone, that's a good way to go. So, yeah. Okay, this sweeping overview is meant only to underline that the relation between sex and horror, which I will refer to as sex horror, to encompass the various combinations outlined above, is well established. The sustained presence of sex horror in film suggests that these two elements fit together and the combination is a source of pleasure, entertainment, fascination, intellectual stimulation, and so forth for many. Yet sex horror is broadly perceived to be disturbing. Where horror includes sex or is presumed to include sex, moralistic critics have used the labels such as gornography and torture porn to disparage those combinations. Shane says, and it ended usually getting to, you are a willing bottom in homosexual activity with a man. Yeah, so and then they regressed to gay jokes. Awesome. The Viking chart topper who was gunned down in a rap battle. Yeah, a rap sail by. Shane says, but you couldn't say that directly. You had to imply you said that out loud with ambiguity. You could get kicked out of the group. Yeah, you have to do it with skill. That's the whole point. There's no you can't just be like, you suck. That's not good. You have to be like, how do they suck and why did they suck, and you have to say it cleverly. We could actually gather empiric data about this to test it. Sure. What, the horror sex or what Shane's talking about? Yeah, we could both of these things. Could look into the skill at rap battling and pornography. No, you couldn't directly call someone a willing bottom in homosexual activity. Yeah, see, that's the thing. That has no skill to just say you are a willing bottom in homosexual activity. That doesn't have any force. You have to be clever about things. That's how it goes. If there wasn't evidence that was exile offense, so you could be, if you were hit by slander, but you could do it obliquely. Okay, so you could not slander somebody, but you could imply it in a way that everyone was like, aha, they are a willing bottom in homosexual activity, and that's bad. And that would be a good insult in that case. Yeah. Yep. So, very, see, people are people. This is how people are. You can't, it's one thing to call someone gay as an insult, and that's not very interesting. Never was. But to do it in a clever way and then everyone be like, oh, they're bad because of this thing, that's always, worth more. I mean, it's the old, I mean, you can even see this cross cultures. There's like old tropes where it's like the best painter is also the best swordsman in like ancient Chinese. I don't know if that's true, but they have this trope I've seen like Chinese cinema. Like you see like Jet Li, like the best person who is like best calligrapher is also the best swordsman. It's like, okay, the person who has the most skill at some other thing can actually kill you best. It's like, yeah, it's ridiculous. Ann says, I'm surrounded by gays. A lot of them assume dudes are passive or gay just because the way they stand or something. They love gossiping about it too. Yeah, it happens. Your farts don't make a sound. His Majesty is like a dose of clap. His Majesty is like a dose of clap. Yeah, Shane says, and that's why Shane's, why the fuck does he even know this pointless bullshit moment of stream? Because it's entertaining, Shane. This is good content. You're a streamer. You have good content. This is great. Like, do you understand what I do when I stream? I talk metaphysics quite often. I know no one out there knows the weird metaphysical theories I know. I'm, even among philosophers, I think I'm like metaphysicians. I have weird positions. I was writing a paper, actually, it's under review right now, with Aris a while back, and he asked me a question, and I said, I could come up with a metaphysics for that. I told him the metaphysics. And he was like, yeah, that's weird. Like, he didn't say it, but you could just see it. And like his response was like, yeah, you're nuts. Like, that's crazy. So I wrote up a paper when I found a way to do it. And like now it may get published. So it's like, yeah, you want to know some weird metaphysics? I know weird metaphysics. Don't ask why I know weird metaphysics. Viper Zoo doing some linguistics. The word bad is actually derived from badal, meaning effeminate man, that trended in the 2000s of using gay as a synonym for bad was actually etymologically correct. Interesting. Who knew? I didn't know that. And says, every moment is a prime gaming Shane McInnes. And that's been Shane's, why the fuck does he even know this pointless bullshit to me? Yeah. But that's how it goes. Yeah. Well, content. Random shit, talk random shit, make ridiculous jokes. It's fun. Yeah. Well, in terms of metaphysics, yeah, I'm not like, in terms of other stuff, no, Shane. I'm not like, I'm going to out niche Arison, like arcane metaphysics, yes. But like, that's most everybody I'm going to out niche in like arcane metaphysics. Yeah. But, yeah. But like, yeah, he will outdo me in like social and like, ethics and stuff, but you're gonna have to get up like a few hundred years earlier to outdo me in metaphysics. Yeah. Prof says we should get arcane metaphysicians tattooed on our necks. That sounds fun. I was always thinking that like if I was gonna have like a business card, I'd literally have to put like logics, metaphysics, inventor, and like other weird things on there. I'm basically, if I was born 400 years ago, I'd be an alchemist. Like that's what I'd be doing. I'm like more insane, like a mad scientist than anything else. So prime gaming Shane McInnes, yes. Street name, exactly. Yeah, no, I would have been like I'm a metaphysician. I would have been like an alchemist. I would have been playing. I like playing with fire. I like doing stupid, dangerous things. So it's like, yeah. So you feel that way about yourself too? Yeah, it's wild. Next time you're out there, we'll play it in your shop. Okay. Yeah, Faustus, exactly. It's like you don't get to do the stupid things I've done without like having like, it's kind of like you play with fire, you're gonna get burned. I can guarantee that from personal experience. But like being able to just like, read shit and like tell people about it immediately on stream, yeah, it took a lot of work. Like I'm not gonna be like, oh yeah, I just like was born this way. No, it took a lot of effort to be able to, read chat, read philosophy, and explain it at the same time. It's like it's not what everyone has done. So like, yeah. Yeah. Speaking of. So despite the evident interest in many individuals have in sex horror, these negative reactions indicate that sex horror is a source of trepidation, moral disdain, or disgust for others. Thus, it appears that sex horror inspires directly competing responses. One might conclude that sex horror itself is paradoxical. See? We're doing philosophy. That it holds two directly opposite meanings simultaneously. However, I will illustrate in this chapter these dual responses are not as contradictory as they might first appear to be. Yeah. Yeah. You watched Big Tits Zombie today. This is oddly fitting of a paper. I try to be relevant. I do. I mean, we can thank Vipers, of course. He is the one that found this paper, and like it's legit. It's in the philosophy website. So this is it. So it's like, yeah, this is the Rutledge Campaign to Media, Sex, and Sexuality. So it's like, yeah, this counts as social philosophy stuff. So. Okay, to begin, let's consider negative responses to sex horror in their bluntest form. These manifest as calls for censorship. Sex horror need not be explicit to incite censorship. Even the juxtaposition rather than merging of sex and horror has been met with protest. Many such complaints have led to the outright banning of films that incorporate sex horror. A Serbian film is a notorious recent example. The film was banned in its uncut form in numerous countries. Because it contains A, representations of consensual sex, rape, and gory murder. B, juxtapositions of sex and horror. And C, scenes in which rape and murder are combined. Check out his other papers. The guy should be on a register. Yeah, this is the problem with some of these philosophers who do edgy topics, is that they are edgy people, and that's not always the best thing. So... torture porn, popular horror after Saw, appealing appalling morality and revenge in I Spit on Your Grave, sex and horror, what we're reading. Yeah, so, porn of the dead, necrophilia, feminism, engendering the undead. Yeah, so, I gotta give the person credit though. These are great titles if you're looking to get your paper, noticed. So, I mean, if you look at my paper titles, they are a little memey sometimes, but they're not going to get me noticed by anyone that would be angry with me. Okay. Routinely, such content is classified as obscene, and censorship is justified as a way of protecting the public from sex horror. and Anne's worried about being conservative. Well, this is the thing. People are, I think, some people are more conservative than others, but it's you get a little bit more conservative in one area, a little less in others, and so even wherever your average ends up, you're more conservative sometimes and a little less. Otherwise, you just end up you can't be way conservative all the time or way liberal all the other time. It just doesn't work. You kind of got to balance that a little bit. Granted, there's people who are more conservative overall and less, but usually they're more forgiving in certain things. Still not as edgy as Kirshner. Who's Kirshner? What's that? Brain's gone at this point. Sorry. You are really, though, not in positive, but I do believe there's a difference between individual and the collective rules of necessary privacy, too. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's you can be a little conservative on different, topics. That's okay. It's not a big deal. Hey, Lumpy, what's going on? Conservatives, though, tend to be the first to be seeking out the most extreme stuff. And that's what I mean. It's even though they may be socially conservative, privately they may not be. Yeah, everyone's here today. Ivan brought a bunch of people over, so it's got a whole bunch. We're reading a fun paper. This is Sex and Horror that Vipers got us. It's great. So, yeah. So, let's see. Who did I not shout out? Let's shout out Lumpy. Lumpy's here. Lumpy is a streamer. Streams Minecraft building cities, fantasy cities at this point. He is also a professional chemist and talks chemistry, politics, money, and other sort of things on his thing. And socially conservative, keep the private, but don't be a piece of shit. Yeah, I mean, I was talking to the husband of this very old friend of mine, and he was like, yeah, I'm trying to be socially liberal, fiscally conservative, and this was in 2010, 2 years after the bank crisis that just fucked everything up. I was like, guess what? That doesn't work. It was the way he broke it down in his head, he wanted socially let people be what they want, and then keep your money safe. I was like, yeah, but except that doesn't work. I was like, come on, man. You just had a failure of the banking industry. It's yeah. Yeah, Anne's a pro-law. Pay taxes, vote. Yeah. It's I like society. Civilization keeps me alive. Pay taxes. Lumpy says, I prepped all I could for the week, heading into another crazy week. At least my boss put it on official paper that I'm dealing with too much chaos. See, at least it's good. Oh, Steven Kirshner. That's what it was. That's right. Thank you, Valpo. Yeah, so at least if you got it on paper that like they're asking too much of you, if anything breaks, like, or anything doesn't go perfectly, then you can be like, look, I did my best. You even said that. Philosophy professor was banned for his comments about sex with minors. Now he's suing to return to campus. Yeah, like this is guy's a straight up pedophile. It was like, come on. Oh, this is from today. Or like this is from this week, not today. This is from this week. Oh my god, did he get out of the pedophile charge or something? Oh my god. Yeah, because he was talking about pedophilia. It should that should be criminalized as a matter of law. That didn't stop his podcast comments from blowing up online, and like he got petitions against him. I forgot about this. So this is interesting. So he wants to get back to teaching. Interesting. Wow. Okay. Thank you, Valpo, for that. Lumpy says, that said, it angers greatly when the system cheats its constituents. Yeah. Yeah, well, no one thinks the system's working great. I do like society because, you know, that water I can just drink right out of the tap. That's awesome. I like being able to do that here. Not everyone can just drink good water out of the tap. It's like I like society and civilization. No one's coming after me, at least not right now. So that's good. But like, yeah, that doesn't mean everything is great. I'm in New York, and I'm always breaking some law when I'm outside. It's just ridiculous. You can always be hassled. It's not cool. And so it's like, you know, there's always bad stuff going on. And it's usually not who is getting blamed for it. It's, that's problem of who's running the media is who's getting blamed for all the bad stuff. Okay, anyway. And so that's why we're reading about sex horror. And, you know, this is one of those times where you get the moral outrage. It's called moral panic, where people, when they see something that they don't like sex horror stuff, they completely lose their mind and they can't see any value in it. And this is a kind of a panic that gets induced. And it's a great concept. There's also something called like aesthetic panic I've heard mentioned once or twice. And what happens is when somebody sees art they don't understand, they also panic in the same way. And it's like when people are talking about like society in ways that you don't understand, it really freaks people out. They don't know how to like have a cultural interpretation of what's going on, and that makes people really uncomfortable. It really gets under their skin when they feel like that they don't have a grasp on like their little world. And so this is kind of where I think we're getting into here, where there's some sort of like sexual or horror aspect that people are not understanding and they lose their minds over it. And maybe that's also what like this stuff taps into, is getting you all riled up. Unreal says, one of my grad school colleagues, her husband became a philosopher prof, and later after I knew him, he got arrested and fired because he had a bunch of CSAM. I was shook when I read about what's a CSAM? Drugs? I don't know. But yeah. So I just wonder, is like moral panic is what's going on in or aesthetic panic, whatever, whichever. Okay, so routinely sexual content is classified as obscene, and censorship is justified as a way of protecting the public from sex horror. Yeah, it's like the public. Yeah. Oh, child sexual assault materials. Okay, yeah. Sorry, I don't have I don't know the lingo about that stuff. Yeah, that's kind of terrible. Not kind of, it is just terrible. Yeah. I mean, philosophers do not constitute the like the moral section of society. I don't know if anyone does, like if there is any more moral group of society, but it's definitely not philosophers. I don't know if it's any worse in philosophy, but like it's definitely not, as far as I can tell, the sociology of it. Philosophers are not like better people. So you're going to get stuff like that every so often. Okay. For instance, the landmark ruling Miller versus California, or v. California, evoked public interest by positing that obscene materials contravene contemporary community standards. The same sentiment is echoed in the UK Criminal Justice and Immigration Act of 2008, which prohibits images that a reasonable person, an average member of the populace, would find grossly offensive. British Board of Film Classification draws on that rhetoric in its guiding principles, one of which is to protect against retarding social and moral development, distorting a viewer's sense of right and wrong, and limiting their capacity for compassion. Even Aris, I look to Aris so much, I mean, I don't know. I mean, he might be, but like there's probably offset by some like deviance, like Unreal Brian's friend's husband. So like that's the thing. It's just gonna get offset. So maybe Aris, but I don't think so. Aris is a stand-up guy, of course. This same strategy for suppressing obscene images is echoed internationally. For instance, in 1977, Spain introduced the S certificate to demarcate films that were likely to damage the sensibility of the viewer. In other words, sex and horror films. I mean, this is interesting. What kind of media is like this damaging? Destructor 92,000, welcome in. People freak out because they lack context when dealing with a pool of over 7 billion people with the unfathomable complexity of attractions, cultures, and fetishes. The lone conservative-minded person who's maybe had intercourse less than 10 times in their lives freaks out in the same way a person experiences an existential crisis when attempting to comprehend the scale of universe after a simple, reclusive, family-focused upbringing. I agree with you. Learn to make more sentences. You can break that up. That was one really fucking long sentence, and welcome in. But yeah, I agree. This is what I mean, moral panic. It's like people, when they lack context, and I think it's more even than just context. It's undermining their understanding of society. Like, there's a lot of times I'm like lacking context, but I sort of understand what's going on a global scale. I feel like when this stuff happens, it's even really undermining more of the way they understand the world. They're like, holy shit, how does this even fit in with my entire worldview? And they can't do it. So I think you're absolutely right. It's because it's like you've got a simple reclusive family upbringing, and then all of a sudden you're seeing someone from a different culture that's completely different from you. It's like, yeah, what are we arguing for? Super long sentences? No. I'm just gonna be refunding all your money this time. You're just trying to screw me up. I'm not arguing against the rules of grammar at this point. You're just getting that refunded too. All right. Yeah, I'm gonna have to what's it called? Make a reject. There we go. I'm gonna have to make an unrejectable one for like 10,000 points. Nah, you're good, DCI. But it's like, I need a few more like rules for this. Like, I can cancel a world or argue for, but it's like a philosophical position. It's like if you say argue against using the word a, like you can't use a word. It's like that doesn't make sense in some sense. It's like arguing against syntax like doesn't make sense. It's like I can't do that. So it's like, yeah. Destructor says moral panic isn't unjustified. As a conservative myself, depravity can be somewhat wide category, but isn't necessarily an irrational one. Why isn't it unjustified? Like, what justifies moral panic in that case? Like, your sense of, like, and I'm just asking, like, honestly, like, what does justify a moral panic? Like, oh my god, this is like, those two women are kissing, and I have never considered lesbians before, and now I'm going to panic over this? Like, it's just, I'm not, like, explain it to me. That's all I'm asking. Because moral panic seems to go with the times. Like, rock and roll was terrible back in the 50s. Like, oh my god. And like, oh yeah, those black people playing music. Like, oh my god. It's like nowadays it's like, so what else are like people supposed to do? They play music. But like, that's the thing. You can disagree with stuff, but why would it induce panic? Is the question. So, yeah, seeing ankles, feeling mischievous, yeah. Save your children from jazz. Like, okay. Well, that's what I was thinking, Shane. But like, maybe there is a justification for it. In some sense, like it's a human reaction. Maybe like panic is a good reaction at times. It's just I need a way to think about it. Anne says, if I streamed as a teacher, I would want people to anonymously submit their students' worst essays for me to read on stream. Yeah, just like hilariously bad stuff. Like, well, there are like Twitter feeds, I think, with that though, where they just like have really bad first lines of papers, like the really trite stuff. Like, you know, people for thousands of years have claimed that water is good. Things like that. Frank says, I think conservatism itself justifies it. All changes should be slow and well studied before making them. A Chesterton's fence sort of thing. I mean, that's fair, but like that's like sort of like self propagating as like that's just not how things should be, and so therefore that's just not how things should be. Now, like, maybe that's true, but like it's also like not really well justified. But like, yeah, you've got a point though, Frank. Shane says we're going down to have to get down to we're going to have to get down to whether or not there are universal morals. Yeah, I mean that's one of the things. Ivan says, to the extent I panic, I would say I have moral panic, not about sex, but wouldn't we have had moral panic about what happened in Germany in the 1930s? Yeah, but what's interesting was no one morally panicked. Like, that was just like, oh, it was sort of like built up, and then everyone was like, that's bad. And they also covered it up a lot because they knew it was bad. But like, moral panic is usually like you see something in society and you freak out. Not that like we have to put a stop to Nazis. But yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Ivan. There aren't like moral, like universal morals. It's not going to really work out. Usually, that's thing. Destructor 92,000 says cultural and moral stability seem to rely on heavy majority agreeing. I'd rather the majority tend towards family and Christian ethics than the extremely unstable modern landscape of sexual cultural liberation. In essence, too much freedom is just chaos. I mean, okay. It seems like that's a relative position, though. And I think that's what other people were saying. It's that it's based on the sort of, you know, where society is at that point. And you're saying, well, you're getting too far away from the middle. You just got to rein in a bit. Like maybe some liberalism is not so bad. You just got to get back towards the non-crazy. I mean, I got that. That's fine. Again, though, what we were saying earlier was that Frank brought up was that it just got to be careful. It's not conservatism for conservatism's sake. Just saying, well, you're going too fast. It's like, well, maybe you're going too slow. It's like, but that's not a good argument. That's all I'm saying. It's like, not that you're wrong. It's just you're going to get at an impasse at that point. You send a PM. Okay, whatever. James and Dewey's meliorism, like that, but more progressive. Don't know what meliorism is, or I can't remember at this point. Frank says it seems like they've changed to those with an insular upbringing. Yeah, sure. Ivan says, I'm talking about how the fascists viciously attacked humanism and liberalism. I think there was moral panic about that, just not enough. Okay, fair. Shane says, right, but that's a biased opinion because nothing has changed. And if you are interpreting it as change, that's your personal experience. Yeah, and that's what I mean. It's going to be very relative to what people think is the sort of the middle. Like you're going to be biased towards what you think is conservative and non-conservative. Like, okay, it's like, sure, that's your opinion. It's just like your opinion, man. But like, why is that the baseline? Why should that be everyone else's standard? And that's going to be a hard thing to answer because the world is very different in different places and people are very different. And so if you think like one thing is like the way the standard it should be, or you're thinking that's the way the world is, chances are you're wrong about that. And I'm not even saying that like you're wrong about it being a good thing. I'm saying the way the world is, it's like your life is not like the way the rest of the world is quite often. So yeah. Shane says cultural stability doesn't depend on a majority of people agreeing. It depends on the people that have power making it stable. You don't have to have the majority of people in agreement for culture to be stable. Fair. I mean, but there are multiple ways of ensuring stability. Like maybe, so you're putting it all on the people there, Shane. Is it that the only way there could be stability? Or like, could there be other things keeping, like, is it really just that the people in power keep it stable, or is it something else? Like, is it the institutions or something otherwise? Because if it is the institutions, maybe Christian ethics is the institution that keeps society stable. Like, I'm not sure that the argument that was given that it was the majority of people keeping in that way, yeah, I agree that's a little shaky, but that doesn't mean there aren't other ways to do this. Yeah. Clicky. Okay, what were we doing? Oh yeah, we were reading about movie classifications. Social structures and institutions can only exist when they have a dominant culture or position. Okay, so yeah, so you're saying basically that they will decline on their own. If they don't, yeah, they wouldn't be institutions. Fair, yeah. Frank says I'm quite liberal compared to US or Australian culture, but I don't think I'd want to do away with the conservatism entirely. There should be some breaks. Yeah, I think most people feel like that. That's what I was saying to Anne earlier. It's that I mean, I know she's very liberal on certain things, and then she says she's more conservative on others. It's like, that's the thing. Everyone feels like, we can go in certain directions, but not so much. And it's like, I was saying in a little bit of defense of, blanking on names already, Destructor, is that, maybe that's just another way to, like, all right, you hold certain things back, other things can go forward, depending. And this is, like, maybe not the worst way of viewing it. But, like, yeah. Ivan Neal said, I had someone argue that if we allow gay marriage, the population will fall and outside non-liberal democratic cultures will take over, as if gay people said, oh, okay, yeah, I'll have kids then. Yeah, I mean, that's also the problem, is that you get a lot of really, really silly things from history. Yeah, and that's a moral panic position, yeah. Destructor says simplified. People are like clay, the old harden and lock in their positions. They are young and moldable, and the infantile are so soft that they are unable to hold their shape. As time goes on, it seems modern liberals are constantly trying to outdo their predecessors, as that was the liberals tend to want, as to be the opposite of their parents. This path, however, has seemingly become and forgive my boomer words, a slippery slope, more like a cascade reaction. The further, they will just become wet goop. Yeah. I mean, that does sound like you're right. You do sound like get off my lawn at this point. It's like, oh, you kids, you're going to ruin society. And like, that's kind of how I take it whenever I hear people saying, oh, a slippery slope down the path to, like, being crap, because like I said, like, people have been saying that forever. Like, there are quotes from all times. Like, some of my favorite quotes. You can go back to the ancient Greeks. There's a quote from Plato in the Phaedrus, where he's criticizing the new technology of the day, making the kids lazy. The new technology that he's criticizing are books and written language. He says you're going to be lazy and you won't have to be able to think for yourself. You won't be able to remember anything because you're just going to be able to go check your new technology, which were books in ancient Greece. So it's like, this is a common refrain. And it's like, so, I mean, maybe I am wrong about this, but like, it just doesn't have like the force of, maybe I have to get old and have like a better view of society. But again, it's like, yes, but like, people have been complaining about this forever and society is still here. So it's just, it seems to me like empirically incorrect. Ivan says, I used to think that way too. I just need you to be more specific about the danger. Slippery slope, it really isn't a good argument. Yeah, well, it's like, eventually society is going to fall apart, I think is the point. But again, yeah, I see what you mean, Ivan. Like, really? How's society just going to fall apart because people are getting soft? Are people really getting soft? I doubt it. People are people. Like, some people are getting soft, some of them harden up. Yeah, there's a bunch of hasty generalizations. I always like to say, though, just because someone doesn't make a perfect argument doesn't mean they're wrong inherently. They may be right, but for the wrong reasons. And so it's like, yeah, people are not like that soft, and I don't think people are going to just turn into goop eventually. This has been, we've been this way for a long time. This is how people are. Ivan, you said there are important things missing from contemporary culture, in your opinion, but we need to get specific. Yeah, if you want to talk about what we need to fix in society, then I think we could have a constructive discussion about that. But yeah, you suppose you were very general. Then I think the main danger is simply coming to hate each other because what is or isn't allowed in culture changes by the day. Yeah. I mean, I agree that we should be a little bit more accepting. I feel that's more a function of contemporary media and culture than like some slippery slope that somehow the liberals have gotten soft and it's all their fault. I don't think that's what's doing it. I mean, I feel like we've got bigger problems technologically and in society than like it being somehow a liberal softness turning us into goop, and that's why we're all at each other's throats. Like, you can make that argument, but that argument hasn't been made. Yeah, exactly, Shane. I totally think that hating people for their differences is a big issue in the current world. Yeah, exactly. It's like, you're not wrong about that, but like, why? What's the point then? You think we can all agree, however, that ski resorts are a slippery slope? Yes, we all agree. Shane even had to disagree with that. God damn it. Yeah, so this is the thing. Injurious to the public good. Why is a movie injurious to the public good? How does anyone make that decision? Like, oh my god, those people are having sex. The public is going to fail. Really? That sex is what's going to happen? Oh yeah, like in the U.S., if anyone who is not from the U.S. and doesn't follow U.S. politics, good on you. But Lauren Boebert, who is our congresswoman from Colorado, was just caught and thrown out of a musical for basically vaping when she wasn't supposed to. You're not supposed to smoke inside or vape inside. And then they had security footage of her getting groped and her groping her date. I don't give a shit about her doing all this stuff. Everyone that's like I know online says, well, she's a hypocrite. She's on like the Republican conservative side and then not doing very conservative things in full. Like it was a like a not a it was a musical of Beetlejuice with lots of little kids around. So it's like I'm not really like, is this really injurious to the public good? Nah, I think it's fine. Like if you want to like, it's maybe too much affection for public affection, but do I really care about like her getting her boob grabbed? No, I don't really care about that. I care about her being a hypocrite. But what is actually injuring the public good at that point? Video nasty. A Wikipedia link. Let's take a look. Let's see. Low budget horror or exploitation film distributed on video cassette. Okay, so this is just okay, so this was a loophole where you could put out these sorts of like sex horror things and or this is just horror, not sex ones, because it avoided the review process, I guess, if you weren't making enough money or whatever on it. She was being disruptive though. Yeah, I know. That's why she got thrown out. Like I bet she would have gotten away with it, not gotten into trouble if she wasn't vaping. The problem is vaping and like taking pictures during a theater show, and they actually get very pissed at you if you take like film of their show because that's like their intellectual property copyright, and so they were paying attention to that. If she had not had her phone out and didn't vape, I bet she would have been fine, or at least not thrown out. Viper says, "I spit on your grave." Last house on the left. Faces of Death and Evil were on the. Interesting. Okay, so this is all like this is a yeah, interesting. So this is yeah, okay, so this is what the way the British government was looking at this stuff. Interesting. Okay, maybe it's worth looking into later. Yeah, it's like what's actually injurious to the society that like someone grabbed a lady's tit like between consenting adults? Like I don't care. It's the context for the paper. Yeah, yeah. It's like definitely these things that people have distributed and wanted, maybe make some money on, but like the little bit of shock and horror, like people want that. So it's like, is that really injurious to the public? Is it? Like people want little shock and horror. Get them out of their everyday humdrum life. Like do it in your own home. You don't have to show it out in public, but like still. Yeah. Lauren Boebert. Yeah. It's like, I don't like her, but like in the grand scheme of things, like I mean, she shouldn't have been doing this in public, but like in the grand scheme of things, like I don't really care. Yeah. And don't vape in front of like kids and like a pregnant lady, and don't be filming someone else's like stuff because you're not supposed to do that. It's like, yeah. The horror film Child's Play 3 supposedly led to the murder of a boy called James Bulger. Really? I mean, I know there's been stuff in movies that people have done and like, killed, like they've copycatted. But I mean, if like literally that one, that's like the only, I see why they review films, yeah. But like exactly why is this gonna harm society? And needs to be banned. Is it really gonna harm society? Or I mean, just let people who want this go get it. Like that's fine. I mean, if we're talking like the one or two murders that happened because of movies, would they have happened just in a different way if that the murderer hadn't seen the movie? I'm suspecting they would have. Man, like should we ban all books that like have murders in them? Like the text on the page, is that injurious to society? Is it? Let's see. Where's the Kantianism? Who said this? Did I say this? Oh God, if I say anything Kantian, I apologize. I'm sorry. Yeah. Is that what Kant would say? I mean, I'm not surprised they review film so people can know what's in the film. If they don't want to go see it, then don't go see it. But like, that's fine. You need to have film reviews and some ratings because, you know, you don't want to see certain stuff. Maybe you just want to see like some bubbly, happy movie with like friendly faces on it because that's what the mood you're in. You don't need to go see some R-rated whatever about it. Oh, if one person died, it obviously wasn't bad to all of society. No, you know, I wasn't saying that. I'm saying if there was a murderer out there, you didn't. It wasn't the movie that I think was causing that person to be a murderer. It wasn't like someone was like, "I'm gonna go see Child's Play 3," and then when they left Child's Play 3, they decided like they were now a murderer. Like Child's Play 3 does not induce murder in the general population, especially if that only happened in one person. I'd say that person was already problematic. So. Yeah. Viper says, I remember watching Oliver Stone defending copycat killings after the release of NBK, paraphrasing, what is this ultimately about protecting liability lawsuits? You could sue Picasso for fracturing the mind. Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, people are going to do stupid shit regardless of the media. Maybe the media can direct them sometimes, but like, people are going to be doing stupid shit anyway. Brian said, Tipper Gore, you have to label the music. I don't like it. Music industry makes bank selling the music. Tipper Gore doesn't like it. Yeah, that's fine. Like what was the old quote? It was explicit lyrics or whatever, and like NWA said that like sold more of their like more CDs for them than anything else that they could have done. You stopped yourself, but I was waiting for a Kant. Yeah, Shane, I'm probably never going to go full Kant. I very rarely ever do that. I stopped myself, but I was waiting for it. Yeah. I know how to not do that for the most part. I've like purged the Kantian thought from my brain. For the once in a blue fucking moon, it does come back, but it's very rare. And it's I'd have to be even more far gone than I am at the moment before that happens. It's all right, Owen. Welcome back. Going full Kant? Yeah, no, never go full Kant. I mean, unless you're from an Australian, then you are a cunt. About time. Yep. Give Tiny Wayne head pats for me. Thanks for being here, Prof. Give Prof a shout out now. Shout out. Yeah, if anyone doesn't know Prof. Lara, he plays a lot of Souls games, but you can talk to him about philosophy. Well, he does it so he talks philosophy and plays games. And he's out in, I think, other side of the country from me. But, like, yeah. And he has a kid. And he has to give a kid bath. So it's cool. So go talk philosophy. He does social philosophy, sociology, and, yeah, philosophy and sociology. That's what he does. So there's good people. And, on the streams, you also get his wife sometimes, who's also awesome, and some of his friends, and they sing karaoke, and these people can sing, so it's awesome. Okay, such complaints about moral and social deterioration are abstract in nature. It is not clear how representations of sex horror have a corrosive impact on society or morality per se. Yeah, this is what I was saying, and I guess the author knew this was coming, and this is why I was worried about it, and they knew. I've said this before. If you're going to read philosophy, if you're going to read it, and you're thinking something, there's always a good chance that that's what the author wants you to think. You have to be careful. These people are very smart. And if like something happens and you think, oh, I'm being clever, chances are they may have done that. Unless you're like, no, they're wrong. But like if you're thinking something, quite often they know that they've done that on purpose. They've set you up. That's what they do. The case is further confused by blurring the core elements of sex horror as well as the line between fictional representation and reality. As Fiona Atwood observes, many within the anti-pornography arguments, reality and fantasy, sexual practices and representations, sex and violence have become so intertwined that they cannot be disentangled. Yeah, and see, this is the thing. They're trying to say this as if you don't actually know the difference between sex and horror. No, most of the time I think it's pretty clear what the difference is. So yeah, but like that's the author's point. William Brown's claim that the presence of sexually explicit imagery in horror films makes it difficult to tell false from real is underpinned by the same kind of conflation at Atwood identifies. In this way of thinking, the sex horror amalgamation confuses generic boundaries, but that confusion is made to stand for an abstract problem regarding the distinction between reality and fantasy. Yeah, straw man. You need that as a reaction. Absolutely, Shane. Anfrel says, ugh, those simplistic puritanical views run rampant. Yeah. Straw man, I could have a little straw man. That would be cute. I'll write that down. I'm thinking of more emotes. But yeah, this is a philosophical strategy. You see this all the time in philosophy too. You muddy the water and then you say, hey, look, you can't see what's going on. It's like, no, you muddied the water. My water is like, it's perfectly clear. I can tell what horror is. I can tell what sex is. It's not that hard. And they're saying, no, you can't tell the difference in this case. It's like, no. It's like, I'm not that confused. And this is what I was saying about like the Child's Play murderer. If that person can't tell the difference between Child's Play with a murderous doll and reality, that's not the problem of the people who made Child's Play. That's the problem of the person who can't tell the difference between a possessed doll that stabs people and reality. Like that's the problem. The person can't tell the difference between a possessed doll and reality, and they think that makes them okay to kill people. No, that's the person's problem, not the movie's problem. All right. Those who seek to suppress sex horror imagery typically garner support for their position by negating these complexities. The reality fantasy problem is reconfigured into a proposal that exposure to sex horror will have demonstrable negative impacts on its audience and society more broadly. That is, viewers who are exposed to sex horror will be incited into committing acts of sexual violence. Yeah. Well, it was children who did the murder. I mean, okay. But like, how many kids saw the movie? Like, again, you've got like, that's not good. And maybe kids are more impressionable. Maybe, I don't know. But most kids don't go around killing people. So it's like, again, maybe kids can't tell the difference between fantasy and reality. But again, then that's also why we, treat kids a bit different, because we don't think of them as completely rational. Depends on the kids. But yeah, it's like everyone here, I think, at least on Twitch, knows about video games, and you can watch video games, and you can watch millions of video games. The joke I saw recently online, there are 3 kinds of video games: murder simulators, colonialism simulators, and blocks. Anyone who's played a video game has killed somebody in the video game, like, unless you are literally just playing like Tetris or Minesweeper. Every other game, you're killing people in colonialism, or you're killing people in like every other game. Like there's like murder simulators, or you're like every detective game, every shoot 'em up. No, like I don't think that's increasing the number of murders out there. Like, it's ridiculous. So yeah. Although the media effect model has been widely refuted, so DCI right here. The paradigm has numerous advantages for those who wish to suppress sex horror. First, the complainant's inability to distinguish between fantasy and reality, which is intrinsic to the argument that fictional representations cause real crimes, is projected onto a sex horror's audience. Thus, the complainant need not justify their position because they allege it is sex horror's consumers who fail to apprehend that fiction and reality are separate. Second, the vagueness about how sex horror could cause social and moral deterioration is transmuted into a practical concern. According to this flawed logic, there is little need to engage with representations of sex horror or to understand why the combination is so disquieting to some. The problem is obvious, as is the solution. Yeah, exactly, Ivan. It's like, well, this is describing the people who are just like, want to ban everything. They don't make sense. These are the people who are in the moral panic. They're just saying, oh, it's going to ruin society and everything's terrible and you shouldn't even look at it. Don't look at it. Don't look at it. I'm scared. I mean, that's what it is. Frank says, I can be moved to rage by Tetris. Fair, but have you murdered anyone well, no. Even if you have murdered someone by Tetris, it was, unless you like took some blocks, some tetraminos, and crushed someone with it, I think the point is that you could not have been simulating what you saw on the screen. It's like, yeah. A logician actually wrote a somewhat manual on logic using chess Like chess, is a formal game, it has formal rules, and you can teach implication by what are the moves that could be made in certain positions. So you can define a logic using chess pieces and the rules of the game of chess. And then he superimposed that on London and made a bomb, like a trying to understand where bombs were going to be set off in London by you could use that theory of chess as a place for figuring out where the next bomb was going to go off. So if someone started a bombing spree based on like rules of logic or chess, then you could get that. But like otherwise, no. Or yeah, you could crush people with tetraminos, which would be interesting too. Although, what was that? There was that Adam Sandler movie, was that where there were old video games were attacking things. What was that movie called? I forget. But yeah, anyone know that old Adam Sandler movie? I think someone might have actually been crushed to death by Tetris pieces. Ivan Neal says adjacent pixels. Thank you, Vipers. Ivan Neal says adjacent things can become fetishized when associated with sex. Sex horror invites people to participate. That is, it's more like porn than documentary or action movie. I am unconvinced that there are media effects studies on this topic because they don't have the statistics. I mean, you could look it up. You can see media effects studies, Cameron and Fraser 2000, Siegel 1993. I don't know what that is. Yeah, I have not looked it up. But you can definitely fetishize things by looking at them. But again, separating out that like murder on the screen and murder in your life is I think people can usually do that. And if you can't separate out like hurting people that like are not into BDSM at least from like real life, then it's more on you than on the movie. But I mean, yes, you are right. I agree that like you can associate things with pleasure and pain that weren't there before. So you can definitely get trained. So yeah. Havenir says, I think media effects are weak, so I'm not denying that there are studies that refute connections between violence and video games. Yeah. That's what I think. It's like, it's very, like, yeah, you can definitely get, like conditioned, like classical, like psychological conditioning. Sure. But like there's a big difference between, getting trained to like certain things and then, I'm going to go murder somebody. Yeah. And yes, not everyone's playing Dungeons and Dragons with Dungeon Masters. I take it. Yeah, there are rules and limits explicitly defined. Yeah, so this is all about consent. It's like people can like that stuff, but the consent thing should be very explicit. Frank says, I think killing someone with tetraminos still wouldn't be because I played Tetris. It would be because I was a murderer and decided to make the murderer Tetris theme. And that's my point. It's like you see stuff like everyone should have at least seen Grand Theft Auto at this point. Do you really think you're going to go rob like steal cars and race them around because of Grand Theft Auto? No, like that's probably not. Are we assuming my kinks here? No, we were assuming you didn't actually understand what a dungeon master was outside of Dungeons and Dragons. Are you saying you know otherwise? Yeah. So they just say, and that's what it is. It's so bad for us that we have to censure it. Yeah. Lumpy says, my only contribution to the sex and horror conversation will be this. Are you familiar with the successful company Bad Dragon? I don't know what that is, Lumpy. Sorry. But yeah. Assuming that I don't is assuming my kink. Well, we apologize. Yeah, we apologize for assuming in the negative. This line of reasoning rose to prominence before the advent of horror or porn studies, both of which were ignited by scholars seeking alternatives to effect-based condemnation. Effect-based reasoning evidently influenced foundational work in these areas. For example, Linda Williams dubbed horror and porn body genres based on their propensity to move audiences. Although much more nuanced than the media effect arguments, Williams' paradigm begins from the premise that these films are significant because they have demonstrable affects demonstrable effective impacts on viewers. Horror scares or disgusts, while porn arouses. Similar concerns are explored in Carol Clover's and Vera Dika's influential examination of slasher movies. Both authors employ a psychoanalytic identification model to understand audience engagement, suggesting that the horror's antagonists achieve sexual gratification from killing, and that audiences vicariously attain voyeuristic sexual pleasure from watching horror. I mean, maybe. Most of the dungeon dwellers are also nerds. Interesting. Lumpy says, I'd post a link, but everything about Bad Dragon is very, very not safe for work and most certainly not TOS. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess, is there anything TOS about the link? And I could just tell everyone, absolutely don't follow that link. Viper says, if Pac-Man had affected us as kids, we'd all be running around in dark rooms, munching pills, and listening to repetitive electronic music. Marcus Brigstock. Exactly, Marcus. Who would ever do such a thing? That's such a great quote. I mean, it just is like, on multiple levels, that's just so great. These early works did little to sway censorious complainants from the dual beliefs that sex horror could cause an increase in real-world sexual violence and that sex horror inculcates sadosexual pleasure. In this view, sex horror's target audience is an abnormal niche of people who do not share the majority's disdain for the sex horror confluence. These presumptions are limited in two crucial ways. First, the target's audience responses are characterized as being homogeneous. However, given that sex horror is presented as disturbing because the two elements supposedly do not belong together, one would expect to find evidence of multiple and/or conflicted responses within the target demographic, not just a divergence between the presumed audiences and the moral majority's views on sex horror. Second, calls for censorship are frequently founded on what are presumed to be normative values, yet those values betray a set of moralistic assumptions about appropriate expressions of sexuality. Yeah, well, Anne must have played Pac-Man. Okay, you can post the link, but do not show it on screen. I will not. The ostensible sex horror paradox from this... baddragon.com. Do not go to baddragon.com. The ostensible, and that's a dash, bad-dragon.com. Definitely don't do that. The ostensible sex horror paradox stems from this unnecessary limited vision of sexuality. Put bluntly, the moralistic position presents sex as being antithetical to horror, but this view fundamentally oversimplifies and misrepresents what sex is. Sex involves bodies, even if only imagined or only one's own body. Bodies can be sources of disgust, and because sex commonly entails the exchange of various bodily fluids, such as saliva, sweat, vaginal juices, semen, sex can provoke fears about interpersonal pollution and pathogenic infection. Genitals' proximity to excretory zones may also trigger related disgust responses. The moralistic characterization of sex horror severely underplays the importance of disgust to human sexuality. Acknowledging the affinities between sex and horror is imperative in developing sophisticated understanding of sex horror. We have confused Anne. Okay. The horrific side of sex has been considered in another of horror studies' foundational psychoanalytic works, Barbara Creed's The Monstrous Feminine. Creed focuses on genitals, gestation, and castration within the horror film context, acknowledging the connections between sex and corporeal horror. Yes, we got body horror. Makes sense. However, Creed's work suffers from the same flaw that plagues psychoanalytic textual analysis more generally. She focuses on symbolic content rather than on what is literally present on screen. Frank Bridtime says, exchange of bodily fluids is such a weird phrase. It makes it sound like a trade of properties instead of just a bit of a mess. Well, this is an academic paper. You got to say things as opposed to just a bit of mess doesn't always cover it. And there's always the things like, why are we so afraid of getting like bee stings and stuff? It's like we do have like a horror response to like getting like stuff into our bodies. And so like a bodily fluid, a fear of needles, it's all going to be tied together. Yeah, well, exactly, Lumpy. It's like, yeah, this is all very official stuff. But I mean, this is a Rutledge companion to like media studies paper. In fact, in the time that has elapsed since The Monstrous Feminine was published, many horror filmmakers have moved towards overt and literal depictions of sexual horror that render psychoanalytic interpretive methods redundant. Films such as Teeth, Bad Biology, Sexual Parasite, Killer Pussy, She Kills, and One-Eyed Monster present genitalia as a source of disgust and monstrosity, while It Follows, Contracted, Night of Something Strange, and The Slit-Mouthed Woman are concerned with sexually transmitted infections. These sex horror films negotiate the complex terrain of pain, pleasure, disgust, and attraction in an unambiguous fashion. Psychoanalysis is not required to uncover repressed sexual horror in these cases. I mean, that's not to say that the psychoanalysts won't have anything to say. I guess it's just moved on to other areas. Despite its shortcomings, Creed's work is notable for its serious engagement with psychosexual horror, and this area is worthy of greater scrutiny than it has received to date. Sex and horror overlap because they evoke some of the same phenomenal experiences and emotions, pleasure, disgust, and so forth, to various degrees. Sex horror is not an unholy union of opposites, in which horror is synonymous with harm and disgust, while sex equates to pleasure and lust. Rather, their edges blur and merge. They are entangled, and so at least sometimes they belong together. Sex is not always a site of shared intimate pleasure. It is at least sometimes awkward, uncomfortable, painful, even traumatic. Simultaneously, horror is at least partially interlaced with drives regarding preservation of one's own life or the well-being of one's social grouping. Horror narratively typically focuses on displeasure, suffering, fear, antisocial behaviors, body damage, psychological anguish, and so forth, related to those impulses. Yet representations of such conditions do not exclude pleasure or preclude pleasurable responses. You know, I get this also maybe from comedy. Comedy is often quite awkward. You know, there's physical comedy. Like, this is get all tied up into that too. So it's like, I would think like the way the physical body is in space, it's awkward. You get all this sort of like awkward comedy. It's like, yeah, this is all going to be, you could be like horrified to be in situations, but they can also be very comedic. So it's not even that far off from other things. The moralistic quest to censure representations of sex horror entails denying these complexities in favor of oversimplified models such as the media effects paradigm. In these suppressive discourses, horror and sex are presented as just bodily matters, corporeally rather than cerebrally stimulating. Moreover, this connection with the physical is leveraged to characterize sex and horror as self-evident, tangible or obvious, and unworthy of intellectual scrutiny. I mean, this is always a strategy. No, you don't have to look at it, just take my word for it. It's very patronizing, really. Okay, although sex horror is condemned, the argument betrays an inability to sufficiently explain what is wrong with sex, horror, or the sex horror combination. Frank says it is comedic if people have an expectation that everything will go smoothly with no physical awkwardness. Yeah, and that's why you get some of these shows, they draw out the awkwardness. You're waiting so long for it all to work out, and they just keep drawing out longer and longer and longer, and you realize that that's what they're doing. It's like there is something to the comedic because you expect it to all work out, or at least there'll be some payoff in the end, but then like they draw it out so long, and you're just like, you know, they're edging you on the laughs. It's a conspicuous gap between pretense and actuality. Yeah. Good point. This gambit is indicative of what Haidt and Hirsch term moral dumbfounding, the stubborn and puzzled maintenance of a moral judgment without supporting reasons. Moral dumbfounding, that's a cutesy term, which seems to occur primarily when people have strong emotion-backed intuitions, as is often the case in matters involving sexuality. Dumbfounding manifests as an inability to explain moral gut feelings verbally, leading towards the post hoc fabrication of moral reasoning. It is... Hey, thanks, MGM, thank you. It is precisely that form of dumbfounding that is evident in the inconsistencies, misunderstandings, and deliberate legal manipulations of language and their interpretation of images in obscenity cases involving sexual content. You know, it's like, it's the old, I know it when I see it. It's like, yeah, that's not actually a very good legal way of doing it. It's like when you see it, or when who sees it? Someone who is just like you? And that's the thing, you're just calling the reasons you have fundamental and saying, well, you can't go any farther, that's fundamental. And that's not, you know, there is something to that. In some areas of philosophy, you just can't keep going. You have to say, this is the end. But when you're talking about other people, why do you get to draw that line there? It's one thing to say, well, look, this is the bottom, like this is the Planck length. Once you go below that, you can't get any smaller or physics breaks. And you need infinite energy to go below this size. That's the bottom for us humans at the moment, given physics. Sure, but why is certain art just crap? Maybe you just don't understand it. Maybe that's the thing. It's they just have to pretend like this is it. There's no more that we can know about these things. But that's not good in a social context. That's not a good philosophy, at least. Indeed, calls to censure sex horror are typically marked by both conceptual confusion and a lack of detailed engagement with the films under scrutiny. For example, the Minneapolis public hearings on ordinance to add pornography as discrimination against women in 1983, Ed Donnerstein referred to the infamous horror film The Texas Chainsaw Massacre as porn in which women are killed in sexual ways. Yet the film contains no sex or nudity. The alleged sexual overtones that make The Texas Chainsaw Massacre a classic example of sex horror for Donnerstein is entirely of his own imagining. The same euphemistic projection of sex onto an asexual horror scenario is evident elsewhere in criticisms of horror movies and slasher films in particular. I was just thinking of The Running Man. And in The Running Man, it's a Paul Verhoeven classic, I believe, with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Yaphet Kotto. Is it Paul Verhoeven, or am I losing my mind? I forget. But it's a classic cyberpunk thing. Penetrating is clearly all just sex imagery, yeah. But what's it called? Arnold is getting attacked by a guy with a chainsaw, and then he reverses the chainsaw and he cuts up from between the guy's legs, and it's hilarious. But it's meant to be a funny scene, and they actually make the guy sing. His voice goes up like he was a eunuch, and it's meant to be comedic. But I'd go with sex horror at that actual time, because they're cutting a guy in half, penis up, and so it's this thing is would you actually call that a slasher film or something? It's no, but that has an aspect of it, and it was comedic on top of it, where they actually maybe they cut the seriousness of it by making it slightly comedic. And Arnold also has a clever line, because the guy's this chainsaw is part of me, and I'm going to make it part of you. And Arnold's that's okay, you can keep it. I love my Running Man. And Yaphet Kotto's the man, too. I love Yaphet. Critics commonly presume that for slasher killers, murder replaces sex. As Cynthia Freeland has it, with orgiastic thrusting motions, the knife or other weapons obviously functions as phallus. Everyone knows, like the teenagers in Scream, what such violence means. And they put the emphasis in. Verhoeven did Total Recall, not The Running Man. Okay, yeah. Paul Michael Glazer, Starsky from Starsky and Hutch. Okay, thank you. Thank you for, Shane called it, yes. And thank you for the movie corrections. Because it didn't feel Verhoeven-y when I was getting all that stuff mixed up. These proclamations reveal less about the film or the target audience than they do about the critics who perceive horror as sex and projects this evaluation onto everyone. Yep. Without a more nuanced understanding of the sex horror confluence, the delegitimization of such representations is nothing more than hollow rhetoric used to support taste and judgments. It is particularly concerning that such insubstantial, subjective verdicts can become enshrined in law. Those who rally against sex horror do not just limit the range of representations available. Such censure also stigmatizes sex horror and consequently territorializes even private contemplation of those perfectly natural elements. Perversely, suppression of sex horror stifles our understanding not only of how complex representation of sex horror are, but also of how complex human sexuality is. And I mean, you get this in the United States, they're banning drag shows nowadays, and it's are you, that's not even bad in any way, shape, or form, and people are freaked out about drag shows nowadays. And it sounds like for the exact same reasons as all of this crap here. Alright, author says, to illustrate, I will briefly consider a case study. A Serbian film, a horror movie that has been widely censored as a result of flouting sexual taboos, including necrophilia, pedophilia, and rape. The images that were and were not subject to censorship in this case reveal the dominant sexual norms of the moment. For instance, the most heavily censored sequence in the UK release involves a woman being suffocated by having a penis forced into her mouth, yet a scene in which a man is lobotomized by having a penis inserted into his eye socket was left untouched. These parallel choices indicate that sexual violence perpetrated against women is less acceptable than male-on-male sexual violence. Indeed, by removing the former, not the latter, the BBFC perpetuates that norm. Yeah, see, interesting. Like, why is one thing versus the other one? Shane says that's a bit of an odd statement, though. Paraphrasing, we should let sex horror happen so that other people understand it's not all just missionary style in the dark. Yeah, that was a little bit quick on the author's, Yeah, that was a little quick on the author's part. I agree. It's like, are we really learning anything about like sex from this, or are we learning something about aesthetics? Is more how complex our aesthetics could be, or human aesthetics are, not necessarily human sexuality. Yeah. Next stream, you got tired? Yeah. Get good sleep. Have a good night, Owen Hunter. Yeah, Sundays and Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern United States time. Yeah. Or if I don't like Sex in the Dark, I like The View. Yeah. So, yeah, I agree with Shane. Like, there's a little bit. This is the wrong ending to the paragraph. It's all how it should have been, but also how complex human aesthetics are, not human sexuality. With that sexuality is reflected in aesthetics, but that's they said the wrong thing there. Getting really good at this, Shane. You're picking out like words that are just wrong. No, see, like if I was a reviewer on this and like I was being more careful, I'd be like, yes, like cross that out and just tell the person, did you mean this or did you mean like aesthetics? Because this is an aesthetic argument, not a human sexuality argument. See, it's just representations of sex horror and then how we appreciate it. Correct. Okay. A Serbian film seeks to broaden the narrow vision of sex implied by such norms, demonstrating that sexual expression takes on a diverse array of non-normative forms. This enriched vision of sex adds depth to the characterization, helping the audience to understand characters' motivations. See, again, maybe this is more of a problem on the author's part that Shane has pointed out. This is, it's not just sex, it's sex and aesthetics here. Because what is of value in understanding how we interrelate with each other has to do with sex, but also has to do with other things. So yeah, Ann says, yeah, in his head, porn is reality, so why would he question it? So it's like, yes, it's a little bit conflated here. But like the character's motivations, are they just having sex to have sex, or are they doing it for other reasons too? So what Ann says, it's like it's a little bit too conflated. For example, when Marco, brother of lead protagonist Milos, visits Milos' wife, Marco retires to the bathroom to masturbate, both because he is aroused by being near her and in order to assuage and thus gain control over his desire for her. This sequence establishes Marco as a lonely, sexually frustrated character and foreshadows the film's climactic sequence in which Marco rapes Maria as part of a pornographic production. He's looking way too into it, like unnecessarily. Well, you got to fill up the paper sometimes, and like you have to have like examples. And now, is this excessive? Maybe, but we're a little past midway through the paper. They did need to have an example, just in terms of the rhetoric of the paper. You have to, you've done all this theory. You have to give an example now. Like, I'm not angry with the structure here. The structure is okay. Maybe this is not the best example though. Yet Marco's motivation is more fully explained in an intervening scene in which he receives oral sex from a prostitute while watching a video of Milos and Maria celebrating their son Peter's birthday. Footage of Peter being told to blow harder to extinguish his birthday candles is intercut with Marco pushing the prostitute's head onto his penis in order to stimulate his failing erection. As she puts it, your animal is snoozing again. The video then abruptly switches to a porn film starring Milos. Marco verbalizes his jealousy over his brother's erection. Why isn't he fucking limp like all the normal people? The BBFC certification version of the film, the home video footage of Peter's birthday and the family's joy, is excised since it juxtaposes an image of a child with Marco's sexual activity. Yet that removal damages the audience's understanding of Marco's motivation. You know, in like this case, it's like he wasn't masturbating about the kid. So it wasn't really about like pedophilia here. It just happened to be nearby. It's like, okay, is that creepy? Yeah, a bit. But like, is it pedophilia? No. I mean, assuming everyone understands that Marco liked the mother. In the censored version, it appears that Marco is simply envious of his brother's sexual prowess. With the birthday footage in place, it is clear that Marco is jealous of Milo's familial happiness, and his envy is translated into a lament about Milo's prowess compared with his own impotence. That transfers underscores how psychologically complex sexuality is. It also offers some explanation but not justification for why Marco rapes Maria in a scenario that pornographer Vukmir describes as a warm family home. Marco attempts to desecrate Milo's family because he feels excluded from their happiness. Consequently, the censored version portrays Marco as a one-dimensional monster. He is reduced only to the atrocity he commits because relevant information about his character is missing. Both cuts of the film condemn Marco's actions, but the uncut version offers a more psychologically nuanced account of Marco's sexual sadism rather than abruptly revealing him to be an inhuman rapist as the censored version does. Although many critics found the film's sex horror irredeemably repulsive, even in its censored form, a Serbian film does not eroticize sexual violence. Indeed, the film could be interpreted as being highly critical of representations that eroticize degradation, particularly those found in extreme pornography. Within a Serbian film, various behaviors that are characteristically found in extreme pornography are rendered as horrific acts of murder. For instance, Leia's and Tassa's death, detailed above, evoke the practice of cock gagging and skull fucking, respectively. Indeed, given that Milo's involvement with extreme porn leads to his own rape, that of his wife and child, their subsequent suicides, the plot appears to vilify extreme pornography. Lumpy says, that reminds me of the scene in BoJack Horseman, oh, like that time I walked in on you masturbating to pictures of your younger self. Quote, I was masturbating to what pictures were representing. You walked in at the worst moment. Yeah, see, that's creepy. I never watched BoJack Horseman. I know people like it, though. No. Like, what were they representing? Which is the weird question. Like, that's strange at that point. But yeah, oh, I'd love it. Okay. One more thing for the stack of things to do. BoJack is deep as fuck. Okay. Even so, the film does not shy away from depicting behaviors that contravene sexual norms. In fact, a Serbian film is also overtly critical of eschewing sex horror to protect one's sensibilities. For example, when Milos is told to have sex with a child, he holds his penis hostage by pressing a knife to his shaft, then launches himself out of a window. Okay, so the guy's like, might be a rapist, but not a pedophile. The absurd slapstick of his response pokes fun at the reactionary desire to forcibly distance oneself from taboo, rather than negotiating one's offense in a more sensible fashion. Thus, a Serbian film confronts its viewer with graphic displays of sex horror, challenging audiences to manage their reactions to sexual taboo. The filmmakers do not simply seek to offend, they dare viewers to reflect on why sex horror is offensive and how one reacts to sex horror. As Schubert observes, a Serbian film's challenging themes provide adults with a space where these issues can be safely explored. It's like, is this safe? I guess is as safe as you're going to get if you want to talk about these themes. Like, yeah, or you can discuss it on Twitch, I guess. I hope I don't get TOS for this. Oh well, and maybe YouTube too. Wouldn't be surprised if, well, I've talked about other sex-based philosophy things on there, and those VODs are still up, so who knows. Furthermore, the film thrust sex horror into the limelight of public discourse. The film garnered attention for showing unshowable things, that is, for portraying sex horror in a public area where that combination is typically eschewed. Consequently, journalists were challenged with finding ways of discussing that material, and as Scott notes in his review of the film, newspaper-friendly euphemisms do not really exist for the images Mr. Spasojevic conjures up. Yeah, this paper is very graphic, it's true. Although the impetus to report on a Serbian film demonstrates that sex horror is of public interest, Scott's reflection indicates that the prevailing discourse is ill-equipped to cope with sex horror. That inadequacy reveals the need to openly address sex horror, since eschewing and censoring it impoverishes the discourse. Confronting and being able to articulate the disgust, anger, and disturbance that sex can generate is imperative to enriching our understanding of human sexuality. Again, they didn't quite make this claim. This is what Anne was saying, and also Shane were saying earlier, that this is a little bit, it has to do with sexuality, but also has to do with our aesthetic criticism. That's what they were talking about this entire paragraph, the inability to talk about it. So it's the ability to talk about it that's lacking. Also, our ability to talk about it affects what we understanding of our sexuality. But like, you have to, they're not exactly the same thing. Sex horror has the capacity to embody those aspects of sexuality and provoke precisely those forms of discussion. Yeah, it's the discussion right there that matters. It's more argued for. Shane says, is this guy trolling us? Is he describing all of that so graphically in order to make us approach this stuff academically? Yeah, so this is I think that is part of the thing. I think this person's a little bit of a troll. As Vipers pointed out, look at all the other papers, titles the person has written. It does seem like this person is trying to be a little antagonistic, which is a little bit of a trolly behavior. Yeah, the heuristic problem. That's right. And that's it. That was it. Notes. That's done. So yeah, I think that's exactly what was going on right there. They're trying to do it to force you to talk about it, and that's why this person wrote the way they did, in order to make you say the things that they wanted you to say in order to get you to talk in the way they wanted you to talk. It's like, yeah. Like, yeah, I may have been quoting them, but I ended up having to say it out loud on Twitch. And soon on YouTube. So, yeah. So, what do we think? Oh, and everyone here, now let's get the review. I don't think I have anything to point out in this paper. There wasn't anything great to look at. But now we get to do a review. Everyone here, we've got a bunch of people here. Feel free to use the Better TTV emotes. If you don't see them, you can get the plugin installed. But anyone can use them, and what happens is they get recorded for posterity, your review, and then I will put them up on a website, and then we can review this paper. So, Shane says it's cleverly written, but I don't think it's very intelligent overall beyond the conceit. Yeah, I get that. Like, basically, it's got one very good point, is what you're saying, kind of, and it just kind of reiterated that. So, like, Ivan thought it was crap, it didn't follow through, and for what it did do, it didn't do it very well. So that's a vote nay, that's a nog turds, and a nog grapes. Those grapes are shriveling up, and it's the nog turd for that. Yeah, so the question is this really good? And I think Shane has a point there. Basically, it has one point the whole time, and does it say a whole lot to it? Now I'm just scrolling through it right here, and they made some points on why people are avoiding it and what happens, but again, those things I think are the moral panic. They called it the dumbfounding, the strategy to basically say, oh, it's bad and there's nothing else to be known. That's just fundamental. It's just dumb. So that's it. I haven't said I think the topic had a lot of promise. There seems to be something very interesting in the connection. It seemed like titillating list of films trying to be edgy. You're pretty mixed with Shane. Well, then vote the way Shane does. You give it a nog turd then, because I appreciate the reviews. I do. Yeah, so in terms of the votes, did this have some fun ideas? I thought it did have some fun ideas. This might be a brain dance with a vote nay for me. It's like you guys are convincing me this isn't a very useful paper, but it did have some fun ideas. Usually I don't combine the brain dance with the vote nay, but that's kind of where I'm leaning at this point. Did it make big claims that shriveled up? What were the big claims? Were there any big claims? Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, Unreal Brian. This really, I don't feel like it was grapes. I don't know if it tried to make any big claims. I think it was just making the one claim it was, so it's not going to get a grapes from me. It doesn't really make any claims. Well, basically it says the only claim it made was that sex horror has value and that people should not ignore that. But like that's about it. So yeah, it's gonna be poops, and I think I'm just gonna go with what I said. We're gonna get the brain dance. It's some fun ideas, but it's really just poop underneath, and that's really was. This wasn't like this was like attempting to be fun, but again the philosophy was bad. So it's like it has the titillation. That's one thing this person does understand. They were trying to, get you to like understand that the value of the sex horror is in the way it makes you react, and they were, I think, trying to make you react a certain way in this paper. But in some sense, if that's all they're trying to do, then maybe they should have just gone and made some sex horror themselves, as opposed to writing an academic paper about it and not saying a whole lot as they went. You almost want to give it the navel because I really think that he was writing this to poke at stuffy academics. That's fair. If you want to give it the navel, go and do so. But it's just like, it just didn't do a whole lot. I think that's what we're coming down to. It just didn't have enough to it. Unreal Brian says that there's something there to be said in philosophy broadly conceived for mooting a worthwhile topic, even if they don't manage to do much with it. Yeah, that's exactly right. Just getting something out there is quite often good enough. And that's kind of what the brain dance is. I put it up there. It's like I feel bad saying it's a bad paper because they are using, like, they're trying to do something different. They're trying to say, like, bring up a new topic. And a lot of times just introducing the topic is enough. But yeah. Lumpy says, but writing the paper is so much easier. Yeah, but writing a shitty paper is not really helpful to the world. Unless what Unreal Brian says is, like, correct. That, just the fact that it got written is good enough, and then, like, it's up to everyone else to, like, take it from there. But again, that isn't a good enough reason to read it. It's a good enough reason to, like, look at the topic. You don't think that's the ultimate purpose of the navel? Yeah, but do I have complete control over how everyone uses it? No. But like if you don't want to put it, don't do it. I mean, it's navel gazing only for academics, but like again, if they were trying to poke academics with this sort of thing, maybe that's good enough. If Unreal Brian is correct, it's a hypothetical. It's just me not taking a position one way or the other. I don't know if everyone in chat agrees with you. Of course you are correct. Lumpy says, to make a film like that, you have to handle a lot of messy props, and you have to go have a creepy relationship with your actors, and then you get sued for 10 years later and so on. Yeah. I guess so. But I guess you could also, just write a, book of smut too. I mean, there's plenty of that. So this person thought it was interesting to, try to have as much horror porn, sex horror stuff as they could in an academic paper. And I mean, if that's the person's fetish, more power to them. But again, it's not really providing us a lot of content in terms of ideas. So it's let's see, anything else? Yeah, it's just saying sex horror is art and should be treated as such. Okay. So yeah, it's I just feel bad. I have a soft spot for people who bring up interesting topics. So that's kind of the thing. Well, you must not get off very much. It's very hard to publish in paywall journals. Yeah. It's very hard to get published, so. And this was in, like I said, this was in the Routledge Companion to Media, Sex, and Sexuality. So this was one of the places where you're going to get a lot of this stuff. All right, anyone else want to get in on the reviews? Please get your reviews in. Shane says, is poking the bear a potential reaction with the description purposely trying to start an argument? I mean, most of philosophy is not poking the bear. This is a more media studies thing, but I guess that would still just be like an intervention. I think they might call stuff, but again, that would just be for an academic thing. That would fall under the navel because it's basically you're writing an intervention for academics, and this wasn't going after this is this is in a textbook. This is literally in a Routledge companion book. So I don't think anyone's actually just reading this. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, me too, Unreal Brian. But again, Thankfully, I'm not in that area of philosophy, so I don't have to worry about it. I don't even quite know exactly the correct usage of it that they do, but like I feel like if you're trying to get yourself into a conversation, like you have to intervene. That's kind of what we were talking about right there. Lumpy says it touches a point I was talking on stream today. I'm baffled at how people are trying to sneak in porn in other media. I'm like, there's the whole internet right there. No need to go find excuses to do smut in the wrong places. Yes, that's correct. I mean, people like to amuse themselves. Sadly, I write my papers. I sometimes leave in just what I think are cutesy sentences, and then I have to take them out later because they're not helpful to me getting the paper published. But it's like when I'm writing it, I try to keep myself entertained because, not everything is 100% fun in doing work. And so you do what you can. And, maybe it's bad practice, but like, again, not everyone is like 100% focused on the right end product. They're doing stuff for the wrong reasons. Shane says, I just sort of have this image in my head of this guy going, these philosophy jerks, they're so lame, they never get out. I'm going to write something to put a bee in their bonnet. Yeah. I mean, that happens. That's exactly right. And it's like, does that make good philosophy? No. Does that make good media studies? Probably not. I don't know media studies enough, but still, it's like, what Obama's third nipple was up, big dog. What's the stream about? Give me some stream lore, my guy. Okay, so I'm a philosopher. There are other philosophers in chat and some other really smart fucking people there too, like historians, sociologists, and physics PhDs and programmers and stuff. And we discuss philosophical topics. The topic of the day was actually, how does sex and horror have aesthetic value? And this person was arguing that basically they didn't argue much. It was a little disappointing, and that's what we were doing. We're reviewing this stuff. AUMGN, thank you for the review. I appreciate it. And basically, this author was saying, look, sex horror, like, slasher films and whatever, it has value, and people who don't like them just don't have anything to say. So it was a disappointing paper, but like the idea that they brought the topic up at all and showed that we don't have any good way of dealing with it is of some value. And that's probably why this got published. It was more for shock and awe, but shock and awe at least is pointing to something in the human experience. And so that's why it had some value.